Welcome to How Not to DM. I'm your host, Derek. Thanks for joining me on my quest to interview the very best Dungeon Masters on this plane of existence. Joel Kleine, aka Midlife Dices, one of my favorite account pun names by the way, is one of the people who seems to have a knack for just about everything he touches. In his past, he's been in bands, he was a school teacher for many years, and lately he's found a niche in TTRPGs. Joel has written a few really useful and interesting supplements to help spice up your game, has gotten into character art and layout work, and has a bunch more ideas he's always working on. Enjoy!
My name is Joel. I go by the name Midlife Dices on Twitter and publishing various things on DM Skills, etc. That name really sums up who I am. I am a midlife. Playing D&D, etc. was a bit of perhaps midlife crisis for me. So the name really just naturally came out of that. And how I got into TTRPGs, well, when I was a kid, my brother and then another pair of brothers that we were really close with, one of them, I don't know if they got it from the library or something, but we got a hold of AD&D. Maybe even the Red Box, actually, to be honest. And then we started playing. I had no clue what I was doing. I was like 8. And it didn't make any sense to me. The math of it didn't make any sense. I was the youngest out of the four of us.
Yeah.
And we played it for a good year and a bit, year and a half or so. And it all came crashing down one time that we were playing, and my character died. And my brother asked the DM, well, is there any way to resurrect him? And the DM said, yeah, there's a fount of resurrection, but it's like 4 or 5 days away. And my brother said, well, yeah, that's too far. I'm going to chop off his head. So he chopped off my character's head. And I screamed in protest. And that's when our parents said, okay, enough. You're not playing this anymore.
Oh, man.
We had to take a break from, but we transitioned very easily into Marvel superheroes that was put out by TSR. And as a comic kid that grew up, started collecting comics when I was 8 or 9, that was amazing to make my own superhero and to get to play in that world. That was phenomenal. And that game we stuck around with for a couple of years, at least, and I introduced a lot of my school friends to it. And then I kind of stopped and hadn't touched any kind of TTRPG for decades until about 15 years ago. I was diagnosed with a hereditary neuromuscular disease called Friedreich's ataxia. And that was fairly devastating to find out, more about that at the age of 32. I was diagnosed. And so part of that, I remember thinking, I need some sort of support group. And they don't even have to know that they're my support group. I just need people that I can get together with and have fun. And so myself and a few other friends, my brother, the one that chopped off my character's head, I even allowed him to be part of it. We got together for a group that started playing board games and poker. And we get together once every 6 weeks or so and just have a blast playing board games and poker. We did that for a number of years. And then finally around 2015, 2016, so 5 years ago, 6 years ago, one of them said, hey, we should play some D&D. And we're all like, yeah, that'd be kind of fun. So, thank goodness for that friend that brought that up, and we found ourselves in the world of D&D, and yeah, it's been great to find that creative outlet at a time where I definitely need it.
Yeah. So, do you remember the first time you ran a game for people? Was it, I guess it would have been with this group. So, yeah, do you remember that? Do you remember what the game was and kind of how the experience went with your first foray behind the screen?
It wasn't actually with that group, it was with my kids. And I think my two sons and a friend and his two daughters. And that was the best way to have my first experience DMing
Yeah.
because they were just kids and totally forgiving. They didn't know the rules. That whatever I said the rules were what they were.
Yep.
So no arguing and just crazy creative ideas coming from them that forced me as the DM to definitely be on my toes for it. And it was just a really quick little story that I made up. And I even told them ahead of time, okay, you're all half orcs. Okay, everyone's a half orc, but you can be whatever class you want. Because the story was the tribal heirlooms of your tribe have been taken and you
Uh-huh.
need to get them back. So it really was just go over there and hunt those orcs and find your things and come back. It was a one shot. It was a ton of fun.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of fun. All right. So you mentioned the good part about it was kind of getting to make up the rules as they came, but also that, there's kind of a lot of, I don't know if chaos is the right word, but they kept you on your toes. Do you remember some of the worst mistakes you made during those early games? And then also, are there kind of mistakes that you feel like you've made recently that people could learn from while you're running games?
Well, so the funniest thing is that my once we started playing, then my two sons really got into it as well.
Yeah.
And they are way better readers than I am. They are like when they read something, it goes into a vault and they know it. So they read the player's handbook, they read the Dungeon Master guide. And so when we kept playing, they said, no, dad, that's not how this works. It goes like this. So I was constantly making mistakes and getting corrected by my kids, which I thought, well, that's awesome. You've read it, you know it. Why wouldn't I celebrate that? Right? Of course,
Yeah.
that rule totally makes sense. So early on, I faced, although they were very forgiving at first, once they got into the game, they knew the rules far better than I did. And so I learned a lot from just putting something out there and them saying, nope, that's not how you do it, which was fine by me. I was an elementary teacher for 20 years, and I always told my students, hey, I'm the happiest person if you can prove me wrong. If I say something and you say, actually, it's like this, and you can show me like the text or the website or the whatever, great. Like you've just learned a very valuable skill right there in doing that. The world needs more fact checkers. So I'm
Yes, it
quite
does.
I'm quite okay with that behavior.
Yeah.
In terms of recent mistakes, my biggest mistake is I tried to go with the fluidity of it all. And in doing so, I lose track of some of the finer points, like especially in
Mm.
combat, right? That, that character has that ability active, and I totally forget about it. And so, thank goodness, I have a couple groups that I DM for, one in particular where we just understand like we're all in this together. This is not me playing, against them or anything. They're really funny. They always address me as DM when we're playing. DM, this and this, but then they'll say Joel when we're just chatting. But DM, actually, this character is doing this, and oh, okay, good to remind me, kind of thing. So what you can learn from that is be better at taking notes than I am, because I'm just not. This is not my bag.
Yeah. I'm laughing only because I feel that very much in my soul that I am also bad at the notes part and the keeping track of all of the different effects and the stuff that people are doing. There's some, virtual tabletops that track that stuff for you, or you can
Sure,
buy those little rings that you put around the characters if you've got them on a physical map that can keep track of it too. But yeah, it's a lot to handle at one time.
I'll show you. The people listening won't be able to see anything, but here's the extent of my notes. Just a
Yeah,
whole
it's
bunch of numbers
yes.
and a few names here and there, maybe some tally marks. And that, like, this booklet is 200 pages of just that.
I
Yeah.
have graph paper and it's the same thing. It's just like initiative orders and that's about it. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
should get better at that. You said you're DMing for a couple groups now. Is it just two? Because I know when we did one of your panels back in the day, you were like DMing 4 or 5 groups or something like that. So,
Yeah, I've calmed down a little bit. I had to stop a couple of groups.
yeah.
So one group I DM for every week and have been for 2 years. We rarely miss a week. So we're just finishing the Curse of Strahd, which
Hmm.
has been a blast.
Yeah, I feel like
And
you had either started that or you were kind of in the thick of it when we did that
yeah,
panel
we've
last
been
year.
thinking of
Yeah.
it because I think we're just over 100 sessions now
Yeah.
of it. And then another group that I was running Icewind Dale, but we've been on hiatus. And then another group that gets together every other week, made up of people that I know from 20 some years ago. We met through a gaming forum for a video game that we all used to play. And then we became kind of this community together. And so a few of us have started getting together every other week to play. And then I actually get to play in one other group.
Fun. Fun. It's
So
always fun to have a regular game where you get to play a little bit too.
yeah, so I get to play, twice a week typically, DMing 75% of the time.
And that gives you plenty of time to work on your other projects, which we'll get into in a bit too. All right. So, with the groups that you're DMing and that you're playing in, do you have any favorite memories of just really epic or fun moments that happened at the table that you can share with us?
Oh, yeah, I'd have to go to the Strahd group. They are out of the 4 players, 3 of them had never played D&D before. One had a little bit. But they are, in terms of role playing and improv, they're so good at all that it has made DMing so easy and such a joy for them because they're constantly bringing things to the table that I can then massage a little bit into the grander story. And
Uh-huh.
so we've had so many good moments where they're just like, oh man, we are so hooped here. What are we going to do? And in the Strahd campaign, you have to gather certain magic items. And so they had worked so hard to gather a couple of them. And there was one session where one of the main NPCs more or less didn't give the ultimatum, but there was a conflict. There was something going on between one of the players that the other players didn't know about. He and I had some in one-on-one sessions
Uh-huh.
playing through parts of his character's story. And so it came to a point where he willingly gave up one of the magic items to an NPC, and the rest of the group was like, "What are you doing? We worked so hard for that." But it was all about fulfillment of that character's story that he and I had been working through. And I mean, so all these guys have known each other for 30, 40 years. And so it's a really safe group to be part of. I've known them for 25. Three of us used to be in a band together 25 years ago. So we know each other quite well in that way. And so they just have so many moments that you can tell there's that unquestionable, like, we're here for each other sort of thing. And you don't have to worry about that at all. But what are you doing? You can't be doing this kind of thing. And so there was even a little bit of some fighting going on, with, and normally I wouldn't recommend fighting between players with dice, but with these guys, like, they were all for it. They thought it was a blast. And, they had a lot of fun kind of taking each other down in that way. And it became such a big part of the story. Yeah. That group is a real hoot to DM for.
It sounds like it. So, when you started running games for your kids and your friend and their kids, were there any particular sources you looked to or people you kind of looked up to as influences on how you run games, or, is there something from YouTube, or is there a podcast in particular you enjoyed, or are there books or resources that you really kind of dug into to get some ideas?
Well, I definitely stick to the, official 5e stuff. My brain, I don't know if I can handle going beyond that realm too much. And so, just reading campaign books, starting with something simple like Lost Mines or Dragon of Icefire Peak, etc.
Yeah.
And then in terms of like how to DM people in my group, there was the friend of mine that said, "Hey, let's try D&D," and he was DMing us through a group. He was a big part of that. And then another friend of mine who, anytime I watch a clip of Conan O'Brien, it's like these two people are brothers, Conan O'Brien and my friend Tom. He just behaves a lot the same way, and I don't think Conan O'Brien, he's been fairly anti-nerd, anti-fantasy D&D, always mocking it. But he would be a hoot to play D&D with. And that's like playing with my friend Tom. He is just, yeah, he will come up with crazy things to say, ways to do things, whereas everyone else is hesitating about how should we do this. He'll just, I'm gonna walk up here and I'm gonna be, oh, here you go, take this gold and blah blah, that kind of thing. We're all like, no, dude. So yeah, I think a lot of it came from probably the two of them, my friends Rob and Tom, and Rob, especially the structure of how to DM, and then Tom, kind of the wild, fun side of things, like the improv side of things, just kind of going with the flow is a huge part of it. And then, on YouTube, I would watch a lot of Realmsmith. They're a Canadian group from Toronto, I think, and they run some really fun campaigns. And yeah, kind of whatever I can get my hands on. I'm not much of a Critical Role watcher, although they look like they're having fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is kind of a matter of preference. So I know there's lots of people who love Critical Role and lots of people who just it's too much, or they just aren't really interested, and that's just fine.
Yeah. I think a big part of it too is I taught elementary kids for 20 years. And a huge part of teaching is, how am I going to sell this to them? A phrase that I learned early on in my teaching was that instead of saying we have to do this, I would say we get to do this. So instead of we have to do this page of math, we get to do this page of math.
Yeah.
And I mean, it doesn't take much critical thinking just to see right past that. But initially, it's this wave of positivity. I get to do this. And so a big part of it was just working with kids for 20 years and how do I keep them entertained? How do I keep kids want to come back? Because the hardest thing for me, I remember being so heartbroken when my first year teaching grade 3 and I'd hit on the first day of school, just say, you know what, Mr. Klein, I don't really like school. I don't want to be here. And immediately my thought was, well, I didn't say this to him, but I'm like, I'm going to make you want to be here. I'm going to do whatever it takes to make you want to be at school and to want to learn and to grow. That's going to be my goal. And so much of the skills of entertaining 10-year-olds ends up coming through in my DMing. Not to make it that my players are of the same intellect as a 10-year-old, although sometimes, a door is just a door and they spend half an hour debating how to open said door. But I think the skill of how do I make this fun for you and how do I make you want to come back? Because that's the best phrase you could ever hear as a DM is, when are we playing next? Yeah, that's what you're after.
It really is. Yeah, and I'm sure teaching has, and maybe even in subconscious ways, has affected the way you run games. So it does sound like it was a valuable place to pull from.
Welcome to Quickfire Chaos!
Okay. Do you have your D100s ready?
Yes.
Okay. First one is personality traits. So let's see what we got here.
87.
Proud, filled with or showing excessive self-esteem, and will often shirk help from others for the sake of pride.
Ooh,
Nice.
interesting.
Okay, next is voice description.
Okay. 11.
11. Their S sound is too long, like a snake.
Nice.
Lastly, what you are asking us to go fetch for you.
19.
You need us to deliver some goods for a local bakery or similar establishment.
All right.
All right. What do you want the business to be and what do you want to be called? And then that's how I'll address you when I show up.
Oh, better bread than dead.
Okay, better bread than dead. I like it. All right. So I will be playing a dreamy sounding wizard who's showing up, and she's going to ask you what you want us to help you with. So someone has told us for some reason as like this party to show up. So I'll show up and I'll say, we've heard you need help, and then we'll just get into it. Hello, are you the owner of this establishment?
Well, can't you tell by my finery? And, I'm not wearing just a simple apron. This fabric is very expensive.
Yes, apologies. It does seem very expensive. We were told that the owner of this bakery had an important job for us.
Yes, yes, it is important. I have these croissants and other delectables that need to be delivered, but I am, as you can see, far too important for such a task. I'm willing to pay. Do you accept fritters as payment.
Are there apple fritters?
Apples. Yes, apples. Yes, I can have one or two of them. Put apples in. Yes.
Very well, I think we could do this. I do have to ask, though, is there not someone you hire for these sorts of deliveries that could help you? I don't mean to make it sound trivial, but of course your business is very important.
I can give apple fritters to someone else. You happen to be here and you happen to say you would like to help. But yes, I do typically, but they're not here. And maybe you had something to do with that. But, yes.
I cannot speak to the location of your previous delivery person, but we can do this for you. We will be back as soon as possible.
Yes, I do take a break when the sun hits that lamppost there, and so be sure to arrive before then. And I do have a short siesta at that time.
I see. Well, we will be here in time to not wake you.
Yes, I require the sleep to keep my skin youthful and everything clean and just right.
Yes, well, we will be on our way then. Yes, thank
So,
you. Thank you very much.
Next time you need anything, come back to Better Bread Than Dead, and I will be sure to have what you need.
Very kind of you. All right, that's it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been fun just to kind of mess around a little bit and play a little bit or do a little bit of role play, you know. All right. So let's get into now questions about your personal projects, stuff that you've been working on. To start off with, how did you get into homebrew and design and art and that kind of thing that you've kind of made your TTRPG projects?
You know, the first thing that I worked on was when I put out in June of 2020 what's called the Raconteurs Lexicon. And I put them out as individual volumes at first. And it really came about because I was DMing a lot. I was playing 4 or 5 games a week back then. And I would get so tired. And I realized that my word choice was becoming really redundant, especially in the last hour of every session. And so I wanted a way, something that would help me fight that. So I worked on Raconteur's Lexicon, which was basically just lists of words having to do with like what's a different way to say bludgeon and what's a different way to say throw or dodge, or what are different ways to dodge, like you miss because of a dodge or because you just miss, and coming up with a whole bunch of words. And so that really got me started in creating things for D&D, and came up, the first volume was about combat, second one was about spells, third one was about environments, and fourth was NPCs, and it just kind of kept on going. And that kind of introduced me to the whole possibility of I can make things and people actually like them. People buy them, which is cool. And I get to keep making stuff. So then I started just branching off into all these different things that I could start making for it. And a lot of it was like finding little gaps. So, for instance, I made a list of valuable spell components because I, as a DM, hated looking through 3 or 4 books to find out, well, can you cast this spell? Like, do you have the right components for it? And so I made a document that I have on DM's Guild called Valuable Spell Components or Materials. What a good pitch. I don't even know the name of the product. And once again, like, just finding a bit of a niche gap and saying, this doesn't exist, and I would really find this handy. And other people buy it, so they must too. Then I started getting into, in the last year, I started actually getting into like creating magic items and things like that. And in January, put out a release called Professor Bucknell's Closet of Confiscated Spellcasting Foci, and where I basically just once again thought of a bit of a gap where I felt like, nobody ever talks about spellcasting focuses. And whenever I'd ask my players, what's your focus? They're like, I don't know, wand or something. These are people that are really good at coming up with stuff, but that was something that would often be neglected. So I thought, I'm going to make something that gets you to think of your spellcast focus and make it something a bit more flavorful. And yeah, so along with that, like, now I've just started creating, for the first time, I've started creating monster stat blocks. I have a thing called Monsters Misspelled. When I'm typing on a monster and I do a typo and it makes something else, I'm like, hey, that could be a monster. So the first one was that I was typing twig blight and I forgot the T. It's a wig blight. I'm like, oh,
wig blight.
There we go. That sounds cool. A little like hairpiece that jumps around from person to person and drains their intelligence. And my second one, I just put out in the January. It's a knoll, but it's Knoll. So it's a hill that basically will attack adventurers. The idea being that they settle in for a camp and then all of a sudden the hill comes alive and begins to attack them. Yeah, so it really is just, I'm at a stage of, I don't really have one thing that I do. I kind of just do whatever comes to my head.
Yeah. Honestly, though, that's sometimes where the best ideas come from instead of trying to be confined to one particular space, right? So you've published, 5 or 6 different volumes of the Raconteurs Lexicon, and that's really cool. I had a guest on a few months ago who made a specific chart for like types of damage for combat, right? Like trying to think of ways to describe it. But you've gone and done, tons of different parts of the games, and all of these are, $1.50 or less.
There's one called the Expanded Edition, and that collects all the volumes. Plus, it has its own monster section. I think it has over 3,000 words in it. One really fun part of it is the spell verbal component generator. So I think about 125 words in 7 different fantasy languages. And so if you're doing like a spell like Chill Touch, you look up the word cold and hand or touch, and then just go across to whatever language you want to put in. You want to put in Dwarven, there are the words. Now here's your verbal component. Because once again, it totally came out of me realizing when, I'm trying to make something dramatic, and then the evil necromancer held out his hands and said, Boogala oogala. Like,
yes.
Oh, so bad. So I needed something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I needed something to make those sound more authentic and dramatic. And so I made that spell component, the verbal generator, and I love it. I love using that.
That's such a good idea. And you could use it in your home game like you're saying, or if you're doing a stream or a podcast or something, it would make it feel more real instead of, it's kind of just above the table talk. Oh, I cast fireball. You're like making it seem like it's happening in the moment. I like that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, I think, the whole part of, with raconteurs is, once again, comes from that need to, I want people to have fun doing this. And so, you hit, you miss, you hit, you miss. How many times do we hear that in a session? But now, if I can make it something visual that, players are going to be like, whoa, okay, so you rolled an 18, but if I can describe it as, you hoist your axe over your shoulder and you come down with a strike and you cleave your opponent, that's far more entertaining than you hit.
Yeah, like you said, the imagery, yeah.
The biggest benefit of it is the more I do it, the more they do it. And they will start to, like Matt Mercer is the whole, and how do you do this? That for me, that's not just when you kill the enemy. It's like throughout the battle, right? They're saying, well, I slide up to the enemy, and just at that moment, I, unsheath my rapier, and I lunge it into their, chest cavity kind of thing as they roll. And if they miss, then I get to come up with, well, no, you don't quite lunge it into the chest cavity. Here's what happens. And so there's a fun interplay between the DM and the players when it comes to that kind of thing, that it's not just me being the narrator. We are narrating this together. We are making this visual and immersive for each other.
Yeah, much more immersive that way. So you mentioned you kind of started in the summer of 2020. What were some of the hurdles that you had to jump over to get into this kind of work? Like learning how to design the stuff yourself, finding artists, or making the art yourself. What are some of the steps you had to take to really get into the quality of content that you've been creating?
Yeah, I mean, at first it was with raconteurs. It was a lot of finding really weird words for things and deciding, yeah, I don't need that word. When it comes to putting things out on DM's Guild, they make that pretty easy for you. There's artwork that can be used as long as you're publishing something there. So, I need to find a decent word program because I don't have Microsoft Word, and it was all about functionality then. In the last year or so, that's when I got into the drawing and illustrating side of things. When I was a kid, my first love was drawing. When I was, 3 or 4, I started drawing, and until I started playing guitar, late junior high, my world was comics and drawing. And so, about a year and a bit ago, I got an Apple Pencil and I started using Procreate, and I started just drawing stuff. And it was really bad at first, and then it slowly got better and better. And, I was pretty happy with when I put out Bucknell's Closet of Confiscated Spellcasting Foci, that I was able to say, like, everything in here, start to finish, was something I did. I illustrated it, I wrote it, I designed it, I did the layout of it. Everything in there was something that I didn't have to borrow, I didn't have to, etc. And so that was a pretty cool point to come to. Now that I've done that, I know that I can do it again. So now it's a matter of, how do I just keep doing it and do it better, hopefully.
Yeah, just continual improvement kind of thing. That
Yeah.
makes sense. One of my brand new patrons as of recording this episode, Pun, asks if you could go back in time and give yourself some advice before you got into game design, what would it be?
Give myself advice. Just go with your gut. Don't overthink, especially early on in the process. Just let yourself go. Something I often tell my students, and they hated this phrase. But I would say, at the beginning, when we're working on a creative writing project, first thing you want to do, I said, is to puke out your ideas. You just blah, and get it all out on the page, right? So, and eventually your filter is going to kick in and say, yeah, that idea works and that doesn't. And that's good. I got to get rid of that. Or I can change that. If I change that, then it actually ties in with this really nice. Problem being that we often put a filter on too early in the process. So you need to kind of let your brain just kind of go and get it all out there, and then learn when to put the filter on. I think that's something I still work on. For me, actually, that skill really started to happen when I was writing songs. I was a songwriter for many years and put out a couple albums in various bands and stuff. And so the idea of you get hit with this moment of inspiration, chords or melody or something, and I would just try and ride that as much as I could, because I knew that at one point my brain would say, whoa, this doesn't make any sense. And I wanted to just keep on pushing myself as long as possible to get to that point, and maybe have, 2 verses and then a chorus by that point. Because when you filter too soon, you're like, okay, what does that line mean? Now the inspiration is lost and you're stuck. So I think with design stuff for D&D too, a lot of it is, I have an idea, okay, I'm just gonna see what I can get out of this, and then eventually I'll go back through and see how I can make it better, etc.
That's good advice. I like that. You've also done some other stuff, like I've mentioned before, facilitating DM advice panels. You're drawing. So how do you keep up with all of the different kinds of content, or do they all kind of mesh together like you were describing when you created the whole Professor Bucknell's confiscated spellcasting foci from top to bottom?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a progression, right? When I was hosting It's About DM Time last year, that was really such a valuable experience in terms of, I just want to get to know people. And I want people to get to know people. One of the most satisfying byproducts of that show is having people introduce themselves to each other, and then seeing on Twitter that they continue to have a relationship, etc. And that's really what that show was about. Was I just want to get to know people, and
Yeah.
we get to talk about something that we all like to talk about. And then from there, it really was, I have a constant need to be making something, to be creating something. And so when I took a break from It's About DM Time, yeah, my brain needed to fill that gap. And so I just started creating things and started really getting into drawing things, with midlife minis, the little and cartoon faces. That was just a fun distraction for like a month and a half, and they were fun to do. And trying to do something that I hadn't tried before. I think that's a big part of, thank goodness for a hobby like this, that we get to explore all these different ways to create. And that is such a fun sandbox to play in. And to get to be in that sandbox with other people is even better.
Yeah, definitely. And it was fun to be part of that first little panel you did. And it's been fun to kind of watch it grow from that too. So, yeah. And
yeah, I hope to bring it back at one point. I'm I know that at one point I'll get antsy enough to do it again.
Yeah.
It was a ton of work coordinating, getting 5 people on board every week and getting, a new topic and new questions and all that kind of stuff. It was a lot of work. And I was driven to do it, and I'm thankful that I got to do it. But so when I bring back, it's going to be possibly a little different, but at the same time, there's so many other people doing that kind of thing. I'm not saying that they're doing it now that I'm not. It's
Right.
I think many people were doing it long before. I just didn't know about them. And so I kind of feel like going back earlier, when I make something, I like to fill a gap. And at that time, It's About DM Time seemed to be filling a gap. But I don't think there's a gap. I think that there are lots of other good shows out there that do this kind of thing. So, I'm not sure if it'll come back.
All right. Well, if it does, let me know. And speaking of the naming and of puns, It's About DM Time is a top tier pun, just like Midlife Dices. So,
that was a good one too. I love those. Midlife Dices came because the group that I played with Strahd with were all, upper 40s or 50-year-olds. So I'm like, okay, we're all, middle-aged, midlife crisis, midlife dices. And I remember I was at the supper table when I got hit with that one. I was like, that's perfect.
yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Inspiration strikes at all sorts of weird times.
Yeah.
All right. So, Joel, what are your words of encouragement and advice to, first of all, let's start with aspiring / new game designers and supplement makers, content creators, that kind of thing?
Just make something. Make stuff for yourself. Don't worry about how you think it's going to be received. Don't worry about how many downloads it's going to get, how much money am I going to get. Make it for yourself, and it's something that you will use and enjoy, etc. And eventually, at one point, other people are going to find it too. Yeah, that's all I got for that.
All right. Then how about to people running games? What's some of your advice for those people?
One episode of It's About DM Time that we were talking about being professional DMs. And the phrase that kept on coming up in that episode was just be the friend that says, you should do this. You should try this. And so I would try and be that friend for anybody. Just try it. You're going to make mistakes. There are people that have been doing it professionally for years and they make mistakes too. Nobody can think that they're going to memorize entire books and rules, etc. Especially when so much of the game is about going with the flow. Don't worry about all that little stuff. You're there to have fun. Your players are there to have fun. Rules, I think, are important in terms of consistency and balance, right? Because otherwise, your players feel like, hey, this happened last time, but now it's not happening this time. What's going on? You don't want that kind of thing. You want players to feel like their actions have consequence. And if the rules are arbitrary, then that's not going to happen. But that said, just have fun, give it a whirl, and allow yourself to get into it. Start with something small, start with something easy, a one shot, or when I say one shot, they often happen over 3 sessions kind of thing. Nice and small and contained is a really good way to start.
Great advice. All right. Where can people find the stuff that you've made, and where can they find you? And then finally, are there any new projects you've got on your plate or stuff to look forward to that's coming out soon?
So you can find me on Twitter at Midlife Dices. And eventually I'll get my Facebook page going because I've got the name. I just haven't done anything with it. I'm on Instagram as well. Wow, where else am I? My link tree is really huge. YouTube and Twitch. I think on Twitch it's midlife_dices. And I am always trying to make up something. Right now, my challenge is every week I want to have something that I put out, whether it's a monster, an item, etc. I want to get more into map stuff. But a fairly new project that I've got is some stock art decorations
Oh, yeah.
that people can purchase called Folio Finery. And right now, as of this taping, I know that I have the Dwarven Gold set, and I will keep expanding with that idea. Basically, I just want to make things that people can use to make their documents look nicer instead of just a plain white page, or try and break from the always having to make it look like a D&D official product that great programs on like GM Bindery and Homebrewery and stuff. But this basically just gives people sets of, here are things you can put in the corner. Here's something you can put, to decorate the header or the footer or different things for the pages. And so, yeah, the first set, Dwarven Gold, kind of all has a bit of a brushed gold look to it. There will be a stone set, and there will be elvish and magic and all that kind of stuff. Whenever I make something, I can never do it as just one thing.
I'm noticing
I always
that.
feel like I need to make a whole bunch of possibilities.
Yeah. Well, nothing wrong with, taking on big projects you can finish. So, but yeah, I'll make sure to put links in the episode notes here for all of Joel's stuff on DM's Guild and his link tree and everything. So you can find all those links. You can find him. You can find all of the old episodes of It's About DM Time and stuff for more advice if you're looking for it. So yeah, thanks so much for joining us, Joel. It's been a ton of fun. You're one of the first people I kind of really connected with in the TTRPG space when I started my show. So it's been fun growing together and also doing stuff together like this.
Yeah, no, I want to thank you. You were someone that I often reach out to. Hey, how do I think when I was starting up, trying to convert It's About Damn Time to a podcast. Derek, how do I do this? So thank you. It's been certainly fun to watch you and your show grow too. That's been pretty exciting.
Definitely. Well, I'm really excited to check out all the new stuff you're coming up with this year. And yeah, we will definitely have to do some more stuff together like this.
Sounds good.